You ever have one of those moments where everything around you slows down, like in a movie just before the big twist? That's how it felt the night of the dinner party. We were at our friend's place, Jake and Hannah's loft, full of laughter, wine, and that over-polished charm that only comes out when adults try too hard to have fun. Emily, my wife, was in her element, wine glass in hand, her cheeks flushed, her laugh echoing through the room like a melody I used to find comforting. She looked beautiful as always. Her dark hair was curled softly at the edges, a silky cascade that fell just below her shoulders. She wore that red dress I loved, tight in the right places, hugging her curves, hinting at a body I once thought I knew better than my own. The topic had drifted towards sex, as it does after the second bottle of Cabernet. Couples were laughing, tossing out anecdotes. Some innocent, some not so much. That's when Emily dropped the bomb. "Honestly," she said between sips, "he's terrible in bed." There was a second of stunned silence before the room erupted into laughter. I smiled. That kind of smile men learn to wear when their pride's been smacked, but they're too polite, or too afraid, to show it. My ears buzzed, but I laughed along. I chuckled like I was in on the joke, like I wasn't slowly unraveling inside. Emily winked at me like it was all in good fun, like her casually tearing down our intimacy in front of friends was just a harmless punchline. A joke, but not everyone laughed. Rachel didn't laugh. She sat across from me, her wine glass raised halfway to her lips, frozen. Her smile died before it reached her eyes, and those eyes, emerald green, intense, locked with mine for a beat too long. And there it was. That shift. It was subtle, but undeniable. Her lips parted slightly, and for the briefest second, her gaze dipped, not to my hands or my mouth, but lower, like she remembered something. Something warm. Something carnal. No one else noticed. The chatter resumed. Jake started a story about some disastrous honeymoon mishap. Emily leaned into it, laughing again, louder now, like she was trying to drown the air with her voice. But Rachel's stare lingered, and I couldn't look away. That look transported me back to a different time. Years ago, a night thick with heat and urgency, skin against skin, the scrape of teeth on a collarbone, fingers gripping bedsheets, the sweet, ragged sound of breathless pleasure. Rachel and I had history, the kind that doesn't get written down or even spoken of, but never fades either. We'd buried it under layers of time and friendship, pretended it never happened, pretended we were just couple friends. Her with whatever rotating boyfriend she brought to game nights. Me with Emily, my wife, her friend. But that night, that goddamn comment, it unburied everything. After dinner, as the crowd thinned and jackets were grabbed, Rachel brushed past me near the door. Her hand touched mine, just a graze. Intentional. Charged. She leaned in, whispering near my ear, her breath warm and sweet with wine. "You're not," she said. "Just that. Nothing more." Then she was gone. I stood there in the doorway, heart pounding, ears still ringing from the echo of her voice. Emily had already moved ahead, thanking Hannah for the food, still glowing from the social spotlight. I followed her to the car like nothing had happened, sat beside her in silence as she prattled on about someone's dress, the dessert, how Jake's new promotion might mean a summer in Europe. Her lips moved, but all I could think about was Rachel's voice. Low, sultry, certain. "You're not." It wasn't just reassurance. It was a memory, a challenge, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, the sense of being wanted, not as a husband or a provider or a safe pair of hands, but as a man, as a lover. I didn't sleep that night. Emily, of course, passed out in her usual way, on her side, breathing softly, her back turned to me. I stared at the ceiling, that comment repeating in my mind on loop. I wondered if she meant it, if she believed it, and then I wondered why I cared so much about what Rachel thought. The truth was, I already knew something was off in our marriage. That comment didn't cause the fracture, it exposed it, like pressing your thumb to a wall and watching it crumble inward. Something had been eroding between us, quietly, unnoticed. Sex had become routine, conversations hollow. The distance, though unspoken, was growing. I just hadn't admitted it to myself until now. But Rachel, she reminded me I was still more than just a punchline. She reminded me of who I used to be, who I might still be. And as the night stretched on and the silence in our room grew thicker, I couldn't help but wonder. Was it wrong that the thought of her, of us, made me hard again? Because God helped me. I didn't feel guilt. I felt alive. It was a humid summer evening, years before I ever met Emily. The kind of night that hums with electricity, where even the air feels suggestive. I was 25, still figuring out who I was, still moving through life like it was one big open door waiting to be walked through. I didn't know I'd be married one day. I didn't know I'd ever need to escape from the life I thought I wanted. But that night, Rachel was the door I walked through. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming party. She was standing by the sliding glass door, holding a glass of sangria, laughing at something I didn't hear. She wore this loose white dress, sheer in the right light, thin straps barely clinging to her shoulders. Her hair was longer then, curling slightly from the heat, and her skin glistened with sweat and moonlight. I didn't know her, but when our eyes met, it felt like I did. She was magnetic, and I gravitated without even meaning to. We talked for an hour without realizing it, about travel, music, the dumbest TV shows we both secretly loved. She had this way of touching your arm mid-laugh, of leaning in just enough to make you feel like the only person in the room. And maybe that night, I was. The conversation turned flirtatious without effort. She said I had troublemaker eyes. I told her she had dangerous lips. It was the kind of chemistry you feel in your bones before it even becomes real. Later, we slipped away from the crowd. I don't even remember whose house it was. But I remember the spare room, the old carpet, the faint thump of music through the walls. And her, back against the door, fingers hooked in my belt loops, eyes dark and hungry. She kissed me first, soft at first, then harder, desperate. Her hands were everywhere, my chest, my neck, tangled in my hair. Mine found the hem of her dress, and she let it rise without protest. She wasn't wearing a bra. When I pressed my mouth to her breast, she gasped like she'd been waiting for it all night. We didn't bother with the bed. We barely made it to the floor. There was something animal about it, unfiltered, primal. She pulled me into her like she needed me, like she wanted to be filled, claimed, undone. Her legs wrapped around me, and her nails raked down my back. We whispered things in the dark, things we'd never repeat, things we didn't mean, but meant in that moment. And the sex, God, it wasn't just physical. It was art. Messy, beautiful, unrepeatable. She moved with purpose, met every thrust like a challenge. She wasn't quiet. She moaned, bit her lip, cried out when I gripped her hips and buried myself deeper. We came hard, sweaty, tangled, panting on the floor. And then, silence. Afterward, we lay there, her head on my chest, fingers tracing circles on my skin. For a few minutes, it felt like more than lust. But we both knew it wasn't. I leave for Chicago tomorrow, she said, her voice quiet. I nodded. Yeah, I figured. No regrets, she asked. None, I said. She smiled, kissed me one last time, and slipped back into her dress. We didn't exchange numbers. We didn't promise to stay in touch. It was understood, this was a night outside time. A beautiful, fleeting thing. And for years, that's what it remained. Until now. Until Emily's voice rang out across that dinner table and shattered something I didn't know was still intact. Until Rachel's eyes met mine, and I saw in them not just memory, but desire. She remembered. And suddenly, I did too. Not just the sex, but how alive she made me feel. How seen. How wanted. It hit me that I hadn't felt that way in a long time. Not with Emily, not even alone. I'd buried that night with all the other things we convince ourselves never mattered. But some nights don't stay buried. Some nights come back to haunt you, and maybe save you. And now, Rachel wasn't just a memory. She was here, and something told me. This time, she wasn't walking away. Something shifted after that dinner party. It was subtle at first, like a draft sneaking through a closed window. I could feel it, but couldn't quite place it. Emily acted like nothing had happened. Kept smiling, kept laughing, even curled up against me in bed that night like she hadn't just gutted me in front of our friends. But I noticed the little things. The way she started turning her phone screen away when she texted. The way she stayed later at work than she used to, claiming team deadlines or last-minute meetings. I've been married long enough to know the rhythm of our life. And these weren't just syncopated beats. They were full-blown dissonance. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I watched. Waited. Gathered data the way someone who's been burned before learns to do. I started noticing names. One in particular, Jason. Jason from work. He came up a lot. Not at first, but gradually, like a character being slowly introduced in a novel before taking over the plot. Jason said this funny thing today. Jason handled that meeting like a pro. Jason thinks the project might run long, so I'll probably be home late. At first, I tried not to read into it. She worked with men. So what? But then I remembered the way she used to talk about me when we first met. The admiration in her voice. The way she dropped my name into conversations like she wanted the world to know she belonged to me. That tone? It was back. But this time, it wasn't about me. Then came the distance. Physically, she was right there. Emotionally, she was somewhere else, tapping away on her phone, laughing at a screen, giving me distracted answers when I asked her anything beyond, "What's for dinner?" One night, I came home early. It was a Thursday. She wasn't expecting me. I walked in, quiet, hoping to surprise her. Instead, I heard her in the kitchen, voice low, intimate, laughing in that throaty way that used to be reserved for our pillow talk. "I miss you too," she said. I froze. She didn't hear me. I backed out silently, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out reason. That was the first time I admitted it to myself. She was cheating. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was a slow-burning truth, smoldering under the surface of everything we'd built. I didn't need proof, not then. I felt it in my bones. Still, part of me held on to denial like a security blanket. Maybe it was emotional. Maybe it hadn't gotten physical yet. Maybe. But I couldn't live in maybe. So I started looking. Gently at first. Checking her phone when she showered. Just glances. Messages were deleted. Conveniently. Entire threads gone, like digital ghosts. Who deletes all their texts? Emily never had. Until now. I noticed she started dressing differently too. Tighter clothes. Lingerie I hadn't seen before. Perfume she only wore on date nights, now sprayed before heading to work. It wasn't for me. One morning, I woke up and watched her getting ready. She stood in front of the mirror, applying lip gloss with this soft little smile like she was daydreaming. I wanted to ask her who she was thinking about. Instead, I just said, "You look beautiful." She turned, surprised. "Thanks," she said. No warmth. Just a word. Then she kissed me on the cheek like a relative and left. That was the day I knew I wasn't just losing her. I had already lost her. I couldn't stop thinking about Jason. I found him on social media, typical finance guy. Square jaw, gym photos, posts about grind culture, and inspirational quotes about levels of success. The kind of man who talks about mindfulness while screwing someone else's wife. I knew his type. I'd seen him before. I didn't hate him, though. Not yet. My anger wasn't even for him. It was for her. For the betrayal. For the performance. For the casual way she slipped into our bed, under our roof, and pretended like everything was fine. I remember the moment I snapped. It was late. Emily was in the shower. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Just once. I hesitated, but only for a second. I picked it up. No lock screen this time. Just a preview. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about your body. Jason." My mouth went dry. My vision blurred. I stared at that message like it was a weapon, like it had the power to cut me in half. Emily came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, humming to herself. She looked refreshed. Renewed. She saw the phone in my hand and froze. I said nothing. Just set it down gently. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded. But I wasn't okay. And something inside me, something vital, died in that moment. Because now I had confirmation. Real, undeniable proof. My wife was having sex with another man. And I hadn't even begun to figure out what the hell I was going to do about it. It was the day after I read the message. I hadn't spoken a word to Emily. I couldn't. The words sat on my tongue like broken glass. Every time I thought about confronting her, I pictured her denial, her tears, her excuses, and I just couldn't stomach it. Not yet. I went to work like normal. Answered emails. Sat through meetings. Smiled when I had to. But inside, I was hollow. Detached. Like I was watching my life through a pane of glass. And then, midway through a spreadsheet I didn't give a damn about, my phone buzzed. A message. From Rachel. "You didn't deserve that." 7 words. But they hit me harder than Emily's betrayal. I stared at the screen for a solid minute, unsure how to respond. My heart raced. I hadn't spoken to Rachel since the dinner party. Hadn't texted her in years, outside of friendly group messages about birthdays and game nights. But here she was, reaching through the fog. "Want to grab coffee?" she followed up. I hesitated. I knew what this could become. I knew the danger. But I also knew I needed to feel seen. To be around someone who didn't make me feel like a placeholder. I typed back. Yeah. When? We met at a small cafe downtown. It wasn't romantic, at least, not on the surface. Mid-afternoon, light filtering through old glass. She was already there when I walked in, stirring a cappuccino, hair tucked behind her ears. No makeup, no jewelry, just Rachel. When she saw me, her smile was soft, not polite, not forced, just real. I meant what I said, she said before I could even sit. What Emily said about you being terrible in bed, that was bullshit. I exhaled, finally letting myself laugh. You really came out swinging. She shook her head. I couldn't believe she said that. I mean, she's your wife. I shrugged. Apparently not a satisfied one. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Don't do that. Don't blame yourself for her cruelty. There was silence between us for a beat, charged and unspoken. I sipped my coffee. It tasted bitter, but I needed the heat in my hands. Then she said it. You were the best I ever had. My head lifted slowly. She wasn't smiling, wasn't flirting. She was remembering. That night, she said, her voice quieter now. It stuck with me. I've never forgotten it. I didn't know what to say. My mind spun back to that summer, the sweat, the moans, the way she said my name like it was a spell. It had been one night. But now, with everything crumbling around me, it felt like the most honest thing I'd ever experienced. I remember too, I said. More than I should. Rachel leaned forward, elbows on the table. I wanted to text you that night, after the dinner party. But I didn't want to make things harder. They're already hard, I said. I found out she's cheating. Rachel didn't look surprised. Just sad. I'm sorry, she said softly. I nodded. I've known something was off for a while. I just didn't want to admit it. She reached across the table and rested her hand on mine. The touch was light, comforting, but charged too. My skin prickled where her fingers met mine. She doesn't see you, Rachel said. But I do. The weight of those words settled into my chest. I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear them until they were said. We talked for another hour about everything and nothing. Old memories. Mutual friends. How strange it is that life can twist and double back in ways you never expect. She didn't push, didn't press, just listened. And God, I needed someone to listen. When we finally stood, there was this moment, right before we parted, where everything hung in the air. I moved to hug her. She stepped in close. Too close. And then her lips were on mine. It wasn't a kiss meant to ignite anything. It was soft, slow, but it carried weight. A reminder. A promise. She pulled back first, I searching mine. I'm not trying to make this more complicated, she whispered. But I'm not going to pretend, either. I don't want you to pretend, I said. My voice cracked, just slightly. She smiled then. A sad, knowing smile. Let me know if you ever want to talk again. Or not talk. And then she walked away. I stood there, motionless, the taste of her still on my lips, the echo of her words in my chest. Emily had lied, cheated, torn us apart with whispers and shadows. But Rachel? She spoke truth. And now, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The kiss lingered. Even days later, I could still feel Rachel's lips pressed to mine. I replayed it in my head slow motion, frame by frame. It wasn't lust. Not yet. It was something deeper. A tether. A memory brought back to life with purpose. But Rachel's kiss, no matter how electric, didn't stop the cold churn of betrayal I felt every time Emily's phone buzzed. I couldn't unsee the message from Jason. I couldn't ignore the hours she disappeared, or the way she flinched when I asked innocent questions like, who were you texting? Or late night again? I had suspicions. Now, I needed facts. So I did something I'd never done before. I dug deep. Emily had always been protective of her phone. Suddenly, it made sense. But late one night, after she passed out beside me, exhausted from whatever lies she'd been living, I slipped it from her hand and went to the bathroom. It was unlocked. I stood under the soft yellow light, heart racing, feeling like a thief in my own marriage. Her messages were mostly clean, nothing damning. But I checked her photo gallery, and that's where I found it. A hidden folder. Not labeled Jason, but just a symbol, locked. Inside were over 24 images. Most innocent at a glance. Selfies. A few shots of a hotel room bed. A wine glass on a nightstand. A mirror pic of Emily in lingerie I'd never seen. And then, one photo I can never erase from my mind. Emily. Naked. Her back arched, mouth open in a moan. Someone's hand wrapped in her hair. Jason's face out of frame, but his reflection caught in the mirror, grinning, shirtless, victorious. I dropped the phone. It thudded on the tile floor. My stomach twisted. My breath caught. I stared at the image like it was a murder scene. Because in a way, it was. It was the murder of our vows. Our intimacy. The quiet destruction of everything we'd built. I scrolled through more messages, now knowing where to look. Found hotel confirmations in her email. She'd booked rooms under aliases. Mostly weekday nights. Never weekends. She wanted to keep her life perfectly segmented from our home life. There were texts too, ones she'd clearly thought were deleted. But her cloud backup hadn't caught up yet. Technology can be cruel like that. Jason, same room as last time. You bring the red one. Emily, already packed. Can't wait to make you forget your name again. Jason, already forgot hers. I wanted to throw the phone into the toilet. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took screenshots. All of it. I emailed them to myself from a burner account. Created a folder. Labeled it clearly. Proof. The next morning, I didn't say anything. I got up early. Made coffee. Kissed Emily on the forehead like I always had. She smiled. Thanks, babe. Babe. That word made me sick. I watched her walk into the kitchen, wearing a robe she once wore for me. Now it felt like someone else's. She stirred sugar into her cup, unaware that I'd seen her naked for another man. Unaware that I knew everything. I didn't confront her that day. Or the next. Instead, I watched her. Watched how easily she lied. How she smiled when she got texts. How she giggled when Jason sent whatever filth he typed into her phone. I wondered how long it had been going on. For months? 6? How many times had I kissed her while she still had him on her skin? How many nights had I made dinner while she recovered from someone else's hands? The rage simmered. But I held it. Because rage, when used wrong, just burns. I wanted precision, clarity, control. So I kept playing the part. The devoted husband. The good guy. I kept the secret of her secret, knowing the moment would come when I would let it loose, not in a scream, but in a whisper sharp enough to cut through bone. The only time I found peace was with Rachel. We texted now. Lightly, but often. She didn't pry. Didn't push. But her words were a bomb. I'm here, she'd write. If you need to talk. Or not talk. And I needed both. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. But I told her enough. She didn't offer pity. Just presence. And every time her name lit up on my screen, I felt something spark again inside me. Something like hope. Something like defiance. Emily had her affair. But I had my truth. And soon enough, she would have it too. There's a kind of silence that comes before a storm, not the peaceful kind, but the charged, waiting kind. That's what it felt like in our home now. Emily moved through the house like nothing was wrong. She still cooked, still folded my laundry, still kissed my cheek goodnight. But every touch felt like a lie. And I let it happen. Because I was building something. Not revenge. Not exactly. I wasn't out to destroy her. I wanted clarity. I wanted exposure. The truth is weight, and I was preparing to drop it like a hammer. In the meantime, Rachel and I had started seeing each other. Not in the way Emily and Jason were. We weren't sneaking off to hotels or tearing each other's clothes off in parking lots. It started with lunches. Then coffee. Then long walks through quiet neighborhoods where no one knew our names. But there was heat. God, there was heat. It hovered between us like static. The kind you feel before a lightning strike. Her fingers would brush mine, and I'd feel it in places I hadn't felt alive in years. She'd look at me, and I knew she remembered every inch of my body. And I remembered hers. The way her hips moved. The way she moaned when I kissed that spot just below her jawline. But we held back. Out of respect. Out of pain. Out of the slow, careful dance of something we both knew could become very real. I don't want to be your rebound, she told me one night, sitting beside me in her apartment, legs curled under her. But I also don't want to be a secret. I nodded, fingers laced together to keep them from reaching for her. You're not a secret, I said. You were never one, she said back, voice low. Not to me. There was a pause. A hum of electricity. Then, do you still think about it? I turned toward her. Every time I closed my eyes. Rachel leaned in slowly, her breath warm against my mouth. She kissed me, soft at first, then deeper. Our mouths moved like they remembered each other, like there had never been years between us. Her hand slid up my chest, and I groaned before pulling back. I can't, I said, breathless. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just nodded. Not until it's finished. Exactly. And it was close. I had everything I needed. The photos. The texts. The hotel bookings. Even a voicemail from Jason where he called Emily baby and talked about her red lace thing. I compiled it all into a folder on a flash drive labeled simply for her. But confrontation wasn't the plan. Not yet. I wanted everyone to see it. I wanted the truth to unravel in the very space where she thought she had the most control, our social circle. The people she gossiped with, the friends she made me perform for, the couples we played board games with while she hid the bruises of her secret life under cardigans and smiles. And I knew exactly how it would happen. Another dinner party. Jake and Hannah were planning one soon. One of their classic, everyone bring a dish, things with wine and too much laughter. The same place where Emily humiliated me with a joke. It felt fitting that her downfall should be staged in the same setting. I RSVP'd with a smile. In the days leading up, I played it cool. Kept things normal. I laughed at her jokes. I let her sleep in. I even sent her flowers at work, and she texted back a heart emoji and, "You're the best." The irony nearly choked me. The night before the dinner, Rachel and I met again. This time, there were no words. She opened the door in a black tank top and nothing else. Her hair down. I soft but burning. I stepped inside, and we didn't even make it to the bedroom. We kissed like drowning people reaching the surface. Her hands pulled me into her, and mine roamed her body like I was rediscovering sacred territory. Clothes fell. Breaths quickened. And then we were skin to skin, chest to chest, lips devouring, hands gripping. When I finally slid into her, we both gasped. It wasn't just sex. It was something more. Something needed. She moved with intention, her hips grinding against mine as she whispered my name again and again. I held her tighter, buried my face in her neck, and let the world fall away. Afterward, we lay tangled in each other. "I've missed this," she whispered. "Me too," I said. "But more than the sex. I missed feeling wanted." She kissed my shoulder. "You've always been wanted." As we lay there, I realized something. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. Emily had taken my loyalty and crushed it. Rachel? She helped me find my self-worth again. Not as a man broken, but as a man rebuilding. Tomorrow would be the dinner party. And when it came, I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't scream. I'd let the truth speak for itself and let Emily choke on every lie she thought she buried. The day of the dinner party arrived with all the usual pretense. Emily buzzed with energy as she got ready, fluttering around the bedroom in a silky navy dress that clung to her like a secret. She curled her hair just the way she knew I liked it and even asked my opinion on her lipstick, like we were still in some version of a marriage. "Does this look too much?" she asked, I seeking approval in the mirror. "It looks good," I said simply, tying my shirt cuffs. "You always look good." Her smile faltered for half a second. I don't know if it was guilt or suspicion that flickered across her eyes, but it was gone just as quickly. She turned back to her makeup, content with the lie. We arrived at Jake and Hannah's loft just past 7. The place buzzed with familiar faces, the same circle of friends who'd laughed at my expense just weeks before. But tonight, I wasn't here to play the clown. I was here to close the curtain. Rachel was already there. She looked breathtaking. Hair swept up, an emerald green dress hugging every curve. She held a glass of red wine in one hand, chatting with Hannah by the makeshift bar. When she saw me, her eyes lingered just a second longer than necessary. No words. Just a glance that said everything. Emily didn't notice. She was busy entertaining, weaving through guests with practiced ease. The perfect hostess, even when the party wasn't hers. It wasn't long before someone made a beeline for her. Of course, it had to be Greg, the one who thought he was charming because he read 2 books on improv and laughs too loudly at his own jokes. "Oh, I remember this crowd," Greg boomed as we all gathered around the living room. "Didn't we have that little bedroom debate last time?" Laughter circled the room. Emily flushed, waving her hand dismissively. "Don't remind me." Wait, wasn't it you, Emily, who said something about your husband being, what was it? Terrible in bed. My stomach tightened, but I stayed calm, sipping my drink like it was nothing. The room laughed. Again, except Rachel. She stepped forward, placing her wine glass carefully on the coffee table. Her eyes were locked on Emily. Her voice cut through the room like the first crack of thunder before a downpour. "He's not terrible in bed," she said clearly. Silence. Every head turned. Time froze. Rachel stood tall, unapologetic. "Actually, he's the best I've ever had." Emily blinked. "Excuse me. You heard me." There was no malice in Rachel's voice. No venom. Just calm, unapologetic truth. "I slept with him. Before you ever did." The silence turned from awkward to radioactive. Emily's face paled. "Rachel, what the hell are you talking about?" "Years ago." Before you and him were ever a thing, Rachel said, taking a step closer. And it wasn't just some meaningless night. It was unforgettable. You could hear the sound of jaws hitting the floor. Someone, Jake, I think, choked on his drink. I stayed quiet, letting the tension breathe. Emily's hands trembled slightly. So this is, what? Some petty revenge thing? You come here and drop this like it means something. Rachel raised an eyebrow. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for honesty. Something this marriage has been lacking for a while now. Emily turned to me. Did you put her up to this? I finally spoke. My voice was low. Even. Steady. No. But I'm not stopping her either. You son of a, Emily started, but then she saw something else. She saw the calm on my face. The lack of surprise. The composure. That's when she knew. I knew. And it broke her. She stared at me like I was a stranger, her mouth opening and closing as if words might somehow repair what was crumbling around her. Rachel stepped back. You humiliated him. Publicly. Lied to everyone. Made him a joke. I'm just setting the record straight. Emily's eyes darted around the room, scanning the sea of stunned faces. The realization hit her all at once, her image, her narrative, her control, slipping through her fingers. I need some air, she muttered, pushing past guests and disappearing through the front door. No one followed her. I sat down, calmly refilling my glass. A few seconds passed before Jake awkwardly cleared his throat. So, who's hungry? The room buzzed again, awkward laughter filling the air like static. But nothing would wash away the silence that came right after Rachel's words. That night, the truth wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It simply existed, loud enough to change everything. Emily didn't come home that night. I didn't wait up. I wasn't sure where she went, maybe to Jason's, maybe just somewhere she could pretend the night hadn't happened. But it didn't matter anymore. The illusion she'd spent so long constructing had collapsed, not in some fiery argument, but with a single, undeniable truth dropped in front of all our friends. I woke the next morning to sunlight pouring through the window and the kind of silence that feels like a fresh start. No text from her. No missed calls. The bed beside me was empty, but for the first time in months, that emptiness didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. She walked through the door just before noon. No dramatic entrance. Just a click of the lock, the sound of heels on hardwood, and then her standing in the kitchen, eyes ringed in smudged eyeliner, lips pressed in a line. You humiliated me, she said. I set down my coffee. No. Rachel told the truth. That's not humiliation. That's consequence. Her voice shook. You let her say that in front of everyone. You let her tear me apart. I laughed short, sharp, hollow. You tore yourself apart the moment you started sleeping with Jason. She flinched. A visible, honest flinch. You. No. I've known for weeks, I said, standing slowly. I found the photos. The texts. The bookings. The lies. She looked like she wanted to deny it, to reach for some excuse, but the weight of the truth was too much. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I wanted to tell you, she finally whispered. No. You wanted to keep me ignorant. There's a difference. She sat at the edge of the kitchen stool, suddenly looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. It just happened. I didn't plan for it. It didn't just happen, Emily. You scheduled it. You prepared for it. You packed lingerie and booked hotel rooms under fake names. That's not a mistake. That's a strategy. Tears welled in her eyes. You have no idea how lonely I felt. I stepped closer, voice still calm. And you think I didn't? You think I didn't notice the distance? The way you pulled away from me in bed? The way you stopped looking at me like I was even in the room? She looked down. I didn't go looking for Rachel, I added. She reached out. And she reminded me that I used to be someone. Someone worth wanting. Emily wiped at her eyes, mascara streaking down her cheek. So what now? I didn't answer right away. I picked up a folder I'd left on the counter and handed it to her. Inside was everything: screenshots, emails, booking receipts, even a transcript of the voicemail Jason left her. Her hands shook as she flipped through it. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I'm not yelling, I said. I'm not slamming doors. I'm not even calling a lawyer yet. But this is over. She looked up. You're leaving. No, you are. Her eyes widened. I want you gone by the end of the week, I said flatly. Take what you need. Leave what you don't. But this house, this life, we built it on trust. And you demolished the foundation. She nodded slowly, stunned into silence. Then, barely above a whisper, does she make you happy? It wasn't spiteful. It wasn't even jealous. It was just raw, broken curiosity. She sees me, I said. And she respects me. That's more than I can say for you. Emily stood, folder clutched to her chest like a wound. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. She walked to the door again, shoulders slumped, heels clicking in defeat. This time, I didn't watch her go. I just turned, poured myself another coffee, and sat in the chair where I used to wait for her late at night, hoping she'd come home with love still in her heart. She didn't. And now? Now, she was gone. Word spread quickly, as it always does in our circle. Some friends texted in confusion. Others stayed silent. A few sent vague, pitying condolences. But I didn't care. I didn't owe anyone explanations. The only person I met with was Rachel. We met at the same cafe. This time, there were no nervous smiles, no cautious glances. I walked in, and she stood to greet me. She didn't speak. She just pulled me into her arms and held me like I was something worth keeping. That night, I slept beside someone who didn't lie, who didn't hide. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream of escape. I dreamed of possibility. 3 days after the dinner party, Emily came back. She wasn't carrying boxes or bags, just herself, looking like someone who'd run out of road. She stood at the front door with the same knock she used to use when she forgot her keys. But now it sounded hesitant, hollow, like even she knew she no longer had a right to knock here. I opened the door, stepped aside. No welcome, no words. She walked in slowly, like she was entering a museum of a life she used to live. Her eyes landed on the living room couch, the old coffee table, the photos we hadn't taken down yet. The memories still hung on the walls, but they were just that now, dust-covered echoes of what we used to be. I just came to talk, she said softly. I nodded, saying nothing, and sat down at the kitchen island. She followed, perching on the edge of a stool like a kid summoned to the principal's office. Her voice was thin. I don't even know where to start. I leaned forward and slid her phone across the counter. It was the one I'd backed up, carefully, precisely, before she left the other night. Open on the screen was the message thread with Jason, the thread she thought she'd deleted. Start here, I said. She glanced down and immediately looked away. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. Her lower lip trembled. Why are you doing this? She asked, almost to herself. Why, show me what I already regret? Because you never admitted it. You lied. Even when the room was spinning, even when the truth was bleeding out around us, you still held your silence like a shield. Emily inhaled sharply, tears welling in her eyes. It was never supposed to go this far. Then where was it supposed to go? I asked. Where's the line, Emily? Was it supposed to stop at kissing? At a text? At the first time he stripped you down in some hotel room while I was home making dinner and wondering why you were smiling at your phone like a teenager in love. She covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook once, then again. I wasn't trying to replace you, she said, muffled through her fingers. I stood and walked to the sink, staring out the window at the quiet street. No, you just wanted everything. You wanted to keep your safe little life and still have someone else make you feel sexy. You wanted a backup to your boredom. I wasn't bored, she snapped suddenly, the first real spark of energy she'd shown. I was invisible. I turned, slowly. And whose fault was that? Her eyes dropped. I'm not saying it's yours. No, I said, voice cold. You're just not taking responsibility for yours. A long silence fell. Heavy. Dense. Then, in a voice barely audible, he broke up with me. I blinked. Jason. She nodded, looking up at me with hollow eyes. He said it was getting too complicated, that he couldn't risk his job. He called me a distraction. I didn't laugh, though the irony begged for it. So, what now? You want sympathy? Closure? No, she said quickly. Not from you. She stood, crossing to the mantel where a framed photo still sat, our wedding day. I hadn't looked at it in weeks, but now I noticed something new. The way my hand wrapped around her waist. The way she looked just past the camera, as if the future was something she hadn't quite committed to. I ruined us, she said. Yes, I said. You did. She turned slowly, and the bravado cracked just enough to let the truth show. Do you love her? I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted her to feel the weight of asking. I don't know, I said, but I trust her. She nodded slowly. And that's more than I gave you. Another silence. This one not sharp, but tired. Worn out. I'll have my things out by the weekend, she said. I gave her a short nod. Good. She crossed the room, paused at the threshold. One more thing. I looked up. Was I really that terrible to you? I let the question hang in the air, then walked over to her. Not close, just enough that she could see my face clearly. No, I said. You were wonderful once. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me, and you started seeing yourself through someone else's eyes. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. I hope you figure out who you really are, I added. And I hope, someday, you're brave enough to love without needing to lie first. She nodded, then turned and walked out the door. This time, I didn't feel shattered. I felt done. I watched her leave, not the woman I married, not even the one who cheated, but a stranger who'd once shared my name, my bed, my life. No, she was just someone I used to know. They say karma moves slowly, like molasses on a cold morning. But once it gets rolling, it sticks to everything. In the weeks after Emily moved out, the fallout began. It started subtle, muted social withdrawals, fewer invites to couples' events, the cold shoulder from some of the very friends she used to gossip with over wine and pasta. Then it got louder. People talk. Always. And when someone like Emily, beautiful, polished, always the social anchor, has her secrets aired in public, they turn. Not because they care about truth, but because scandal is social currency, and suddenly, she was bankrupt. I didn't have to say a word. Rachel's declaration that night had done all the heavy lifting. Word spread that Emily had cheated, that she'd humiliated me in public, that her affair wasn't just a fling, it was a calculated, drawn-out betrayal. And worse, that I had handled it with grace while she spiraled. Jason dropped her within days of the confrontation. According to a mutual friend, his firm was getting wind of inappropriate workplace behavior, and he couldn't afford the risk. So he cut her loose with a few sentences and a coward's silence. Emily called me 3 times that week. I didn't answer once. Her 4th message was just one line. I don't know who I am without you. That, right there, that was the final nail. Because for all the lies, the betrayal, the excuses, what stung most was that in the end, she still made it about her. But I wasn't hers anymore. I was someone else now. Someone rebuilding, reclaiming, rising. Rachel and I took things slow, not because we lacked passion, but because we respected what was happening. We didn't dive into bed to forget the past. We held each other as if we were remembering the future. She came over one evening with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat on the couch, legs tangled, food barely touched, as we talked about everything, our past, our regrets, the strange second chances life hands us when we least expect it. I didn't expect this, I said. She smiled, sipping her wine. What did you expect? Bitterness. Isolation. Maybe a dog. She laughed, then leaned over and kissed me soft and unhurried. No dogs. Just me. That night, we didn't just have sex. We made something new. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about validation. It was about connection. I traced every curve of her like I was rediscovering something sacred. She pulled me into her like she was anchoring herself. And when we came together, it wasn't fireworks, it was gravity. Afterward, we lay in bed, her head on my chest, my fingers in her hair. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. I didn't think I'd ever trust again, I whispered. Me neither, she said. But we did. And that's how I rose. Not by burning Emily to the ground. Not by shouting or dragging her name through the mud. I rose by walking away. Quietly. With proof. With dignity. And with someone beside me who saw my worth before anyone else did. Emily's fall was loud. She lost more than just her marriage, she lost her narrative. And the woman who once mocked me in front of friends now avoids those same circles, her name still whispered, but never with the reverence she once commanded. As for me, I stopped being the man in the background. I started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. I traveled with Rachel, short trips at first, then longer ones. I found joy in simple things. Cooking dinner without tension, falling asleep without wondering who she was texting, waking up beside someone who chose to be there. One night, we were out with friends, some old, some new, and someone made a playful jab at bedroom performance. The group laughed. The moment mirrored that awful dinner party in its setup, but this time, everything was different. Rachel didn't flinch. She smiled and said, "Trust me, he's unforgettable." The laughter that followed wasn't mocking. It was earned. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to prove anything, because I wasn't the joke anymore. I was the man who walked through hell, held his silence, found truth in the wreckage, and built something better on the ashes. Not every story ends in reconciliation. Some end in rediscovery. And mine, it's just beginning. It's funny how people think lies disappear with time. That once the words are out, they vanish into air. But the truth is, lies leave residue. They stick to the corners of a life, like mold in a forgotten room. You can't always see them right away, but they're there. slowly rotting everything they touch. Emily's lie didn't just fracture our marriage. It redefined her. She didn't see it coming. The way people distanced themselves, not overtly, not cruelly, but definitively. Friends who used to fawn over her social charm now gave her clipped conversations, hollow nods, polite disinterest. The invitations dried up. The texts stopped pinging. The spotlight dimmed. And the worst part? Jason moved on without her. He didn't just end the affair. He erased it. Blocked her. Deleted her photos. Went back to his curated image like she was a chapter he never wanted to reread. In the end, she wasn't his new beginning. She was a regrettable detour. I saw her once, months later, in a bookstore of all places. She looked thinner, tired, wearing sunglasses indoors and holding a book she wasn't really reading. She saw me before I saw her. I felt the weight of her gaze. I turned. Rachel was beside me, holding my hand. She leaned in and kissed my cheek, whispering something about dinner reservations. I smiled and nodded. And Emily? She just stood there, watching. She didn't approach. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. Because what could she say? She'd thrown everything away for a man who used her and left her. And the one man who truly loved her, who tried, who listened, who stayed, was now someone else's. Her lie had a cost, and she paid it in full. People love to talk about closure like it's a grand event, a dramatic confrontation, a heartfelt apology. But sometimes, closure is a slow fade. A glance across a bookstore aisle, a silence where once there was love. Sometimes, it's simply knowing you walked away with your dignity, and they didn't. Rachel and I didn't rush to label things, but what we built was solid, honest, beautiful in its simplicity. We learned to speak in truths, even when they hurt. We laughed more, fought less, made love not to fix something broken, but to celebrate what wasn't. One night, lying in bed with her, she asked, "Do you ever miss her?" It caught me off guard. But I didn't lie. "I miss who I thought she was," I said. "But not who she turned out to be." Rachel nodded, resting her head on my chest. "That's fair." I stroked her hair gently. "Do you regret saying what you said at the party?" She looked up, eyes steady. "Not for a second." I smiled. "Good. Because that night, you didn't just expose her. You saved me." And she had. She reminded me I was still a man worth something. That the betrayal didn't define me. That even after love turns to ash, new things can grow. Emily's loss wasn't about me anymore. It was about the woman she could have been, the partner she chose not to be, the loyalty she traded for lust, the life she buried in silence and deceit. She used to say I didn't fight for her. But the truth? She wasn't worth the war. Now, when people ask if I'm bitter, I tell them no. I'm better. Better than the man who used to walk on eggshells. Better than the husband who mistook tolerance for love. Better than the ghost of a life I used to sleep beside. And Emily? She lives with the echo of her lie, with the silence that follows her wherever she goes, with the knowledge that she lost not just a man, but the version of herself that once had everything. Her lie, her loss, my rise. And for the first time in a long, long time, I'm finally free.